It's always very, very hard on Yom Kippur to give a sermon after a drasha, after a yizkar. It's looking around our holy congregation, seeing the lights in the back. It's such a privilege. It's such a privilege. And my heart just breaks for all of those who, Jenny and I feel very privileged to know the pain that's in people's hearts, but it hurts us too, and we feel it. And my sermon today is not exactly a light one. It's a heavy topic. I hope I do it justice. And I want to say I'm offering this is the kind of teaching I'm giving back to you, but really it's you that have taught it to me and to Jenny. You've taught it to us. And I'm going to offer it in the style of a question. It's a question that I've been asked numerous times over the years, and frankly, I felt the question was too difficult, too deep, too much for me to fully understand and grasp, but I'm going to make an attempt this Yom Kippur to address it. And the way that questions work amongst rabbis, and I'm so grateful to be a rabbi of a conservative shul where halakha still has a hold on us, Jewish law, because the way that Jewish law happens, a lot of you know how this works, it's called responsa. It's she'ela u'tshuva. She'elot u'tshuvot. The way it works is that a congregant or a person asks, Rabbi, for example, I'm not feeling well. Do I have to fast on Yom Kippur? That's called a she'ela, formally asking a question of a rabbi. And our job is to answer that question, to give a halachic based on Jewish law, what we research, what it says. And the question I want to focus on today is one of the most challenging questions I've ever faced. And it's been asked by you. What do I do? How do I give a eulogy for a person in which I have nothing good to say? How do I give a eulogy for someone when there's nothing good to say? I'm hearing the microphones going.
Yes, so come on this side. Just come on this side.
Follow the wife. Better?
Yeah,
Okay. So before I go, not better?
Just leave it.
Can't leave it. This is how the Solomon house works. You're getting insight. All right. It's good. We need to have a little levity because it's a tough question, okay? So before I get into the tough question.
Yeah. And you're going to.
Opposite. Better? There is a God. Okay. All right. Tough. So, how do you give a eulogy when there is nothing good to say? Now, before I even give this, we got to make it a little lighter, okay? A little lighter. I'm going to tell a true story about this exact process of questions and answers of the rabbi. And I remember this so vividly when I first arrived. An amazing congregant, sadly no longer in this world, may rest in peace, Harry Shearer, who was a long-standing member of Beth Meyer Synagogue, and I believe, if I remember correctly, was in the clothing business and had something in downtown Raleigh or in near areas. And Harry has a remarkable life himself. He actually was born in Germany, escaped, went back to serve as a U.S. military fighting the Nazis in the European theater. And the story he told me, I remember like to this day, where he said he, as a young soldier, he and a number of young GIs were in Europe, Jewish GIs, and they had a question because it was about to be, I don't remember the exact battle moment, but it was something like the Battle of the Bulge or Normandy. It was some major moment where all these soldiers were going to go forward and sadly didn't know what was going to happen. It was very dangerous. And he said that they gave them rations for a few days because they weren't going to be able to refill their food. And all these young Jewish GIs got together. They opened up their rations and they saw the main source of protein was Spam. And Harry said, not all of us were that religious or that observant, but there weren't a lot of options. This is all they had. They were going to go to this major event. They didn't know what they're going to, they're 18, 19 years old. So they went to the rabbi. And he told me this good. It's exactly, she'ela u'tshuva. Rabbi, we're going to fight this battle. We need to have food. This is the rations. It's Spam. Anyone doesn't know what Spam is, it's just know it's not kosher, okay? It's not kosher. So he said, what do we do? So the rabbi said, okay, I got to go look in the books. I got to look it up. They took in the Talmud. What do you say? And he looks it up. And he comes back. I have an answer. Gathered all the Jewish soldiers. And says, here's the answer. Because you need to preserve your life, you are allowed to eat the Spam. However, you can't enjoy it.
I want to think the rabbi told a joke, but I don't know how rabbis are. I don't know. You can't enjoy it. All right, but that is the idea. You ask a question, and a rabbi's job is to try to come up with an answer. And so I want to come back and say, I have seen in this congregation over our years, members of our shul who have struggled with this question and have exquisitely found a way. I stand in awe. I offer mainly a listening ear of what to do when you don't know what or have nothing good to say in a eulogy. How do you go about it? People have found a way around it, found a way to say something from the family. It's been excruciatingly difficult, but it's balancing the midst of honoring the person, honoring the deceased, often honoring a mother and father, but also wanting to honor truth and honoring the pain and the wounds at the same time. And so for this reason, I want to address it. Now, I want to say before I give in because I did a lot of research on this, I'm going to try and bring it together as concisely as I can bring it. But I want to be really clear. When I bring what I'm going to say here, I'm not talking about situations of legal, criminal, definitive, abusive behavior by, for example, one's parent. In that case, that's a whole other sermon, and that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here are people that they did very, very difficult, even mean-spirited, harsh, rude, insensitive. We could go down the list. Difficult, manipulative, okay? Very, very difficult things, but wouldn't necessarily call it abusive. Maybe it's in the gray, but it's something where you feel that you have an obligation to say something out of respect, but you find it very, very difficult. And the second thing I want to say is, some of you here might be saying, that's not me. I mean, I don't have that relationship with this. That's never going to happen to me. Well, okay, easy. Not so quick. If there's one thing I know about I've done a lot of funerals, guys. I know what I'm talking about here a little bit, okay? Is that what I'm going to talk about here, yes, it will apply in the case of that where you don't know what to say or not have anything good to say. But the truth is, at the end, if you listen, I hope, if I do this in a way that you hear the text I bring, it really applies to actually any eulogy at any time. So I'm going to give you three kind of sources. The first two, unfortunately, I don't think they're going to solve our problem yet. They're going to set the table. And the third one, I think hopefully is going to bring it home a little bit here. So here are the first two. So the first thing that I found in Jewish law, specifically about eulogies, in Hebrew called a hesped, what do you do when you need to give a hesped in general? Is it says you should say words that bring, ideally, tears, that break the heart, and speak of the good deeds of the deceased. Now, the first two, break the heart and bring tears, could happen under any circumstance of when you don't know exactly what to say. But speaking of the good deeds, that exactly is the problem. So I want to say the Shulchan Aruch has put out here that we should speak of good deeds of the deceased, but what if you find it extremely difficult to find any good deeds? So in source one, I want to say, we're having a little bit of a challenge, but just hold that for a second. Let's see if we can capture it back a little bit later. Because the second source I looked at, which is always what we look at, is the Talmud. 2,000 years ago, the text of our tradition, what the rabbis put together, they have a whole section in a Masechet, a tractate called Sanhedrin, all discussing what is a hesped, how to do it right, how to do it well. And the question they ask, check this out, is they say, who is the eulogy for? Is the eulogy for the living people, the mourners, and those in attendance to give them comfort? Or is the eulogy for the deceased person to make them honored in the process? Who is it for? Now, for the sake of this sermon, it'd be nice if it was for the living. Because then I could say it's for the living, do whatever you need to do with your eulogy, or don't even give a eulogy because it's for you and not for someone else. And by the way, in Jewish law, in mourning, some of you know this already, a lot of the mourning laws are put in this distinction. Shachve v'chaye. Shachve means the one who's deceased. Chaye, the one who is living. Shiva is for the living. So when I go to you and I say often, I'd like you to consider sitting a week of Shiva, but some of you say, for various reasons, I want to sit less days, I want this many, I want it like this, and you're like, Rabbi, can I do that? The answer is, it's for you. Shiva is meant to give you comfort. Therefore, you can decide how you want to sit Shiva based on the tradition. On the other hand, burying a person with the soil, that's not for Chaye. That's actually not for you. That's for the deceased, and you have to do it. Now, I recognize some may say, I don't want to, I can't, I don't have physical ability, but ultimately that mitzvah is for the deceased. It's actually not for you. It's for honoring their body. That's a gift from God. It's not for you. So Jewish law distinguishes, is it for the living or for the deceased? And unfortunately, as the Talmud does, it doesn't give a clear answer to that question. It says, here are the arguments for Shachve, here's Anachaye, could be the deceased, could be for the living. In the end, the Hebrew word is a teku, it's a tie. We don't know. So first the Shulchan Aruch says, honor deceased, it's not really helping so much. Then it says, no, the Talmud's not helping. Okay, so let me give you my third source. My third source is a famous professor, may rest in peace, perhaps the most prominent professor of Jewish history at his time at Columbia University, named Chaim Yosef Yerushalmi. He had the Selo Baron chair. If you know, Selo Baron was one of the greatest scholars of Jewish history before him, and he was the preeminent scholar of his time, really in the 20th century. And he wrote a book called Zachor. He's a great Jewish historian, okay? And in his thing, he said, I devoted my whole life, this beautiful little book, he says, to history. I'm a Jew, I believe in Jewish history, it's all important. But he says, but my whole life mission, I want to tell you, I think on some level, Jewishly, it's a mistake. I think Jews ultimately, hear me out here, this is not me saying it only, it's him too, okay? We don't really care about history, we care about memory. Now you're going to say to me, well, if you're doing history and memory, well, Dr. Yerushalmi says it powerfully. History is what actually happened. Why it happened. What were the dates? When did things occur? What caused those things to occur? Who was involved in what occurred? What are the artifacts of what occurred? That's history. And that is an important project. He didn't say it with zero needed. The Jewish community cares about history. We care about history, okay? History matters. But religiously, it's all about memory. Remember you were slaves in Egypt? Remember the heart of the stranger because you were once a stranger? Remember the 6 million? It's about remembering. And what we remember is not the same as what happened. The whole thing about eyewitnesses? Where are all my law enforcement people? 50% of eyewitnesses who see an event get it wrong. 50%. So just because you have the history right doesn't mean you have the memory right. And in fact, Yerushalmi says, for Jews, more important than history is memory, because memory is how you live your life going forward. History is what happened. Memory is what you're going to do about it. Just to give you one example from the Torah. In the book of Exodus, when we're wandering in the desert, we get the 10 Commandments. The famous commandment is keep Shabbat. Why does God say keep Shabbat in that through Moshe? It says to us, because God created the world in the seventh day. On the seventh day, God rested, so you too shall rest. Tough. But when you get to the back of the book, book 5, Deuteronomy, which is a retelling, Moses telling his memories of the whole story, the 10 Commandments come again. Shabbat's brought again. Why is there Shabbat? In the 10 Commandments. It doesn't mention because God created the world. It says, keep Shabbat. Why? If I can guess it. Because you were slaves in the land of Egypt and you didn't have freedom over your time. And God wants to keep Shabbat because of freedom of Egypt. You have the freedom to keep Shabbat. The question is, which one is it? Did God create because of creation Shabbat or because of the Exodus Shabbat? Which one is it? Aha. When we were in the desert wandering and didn't have a job, God says, do it because I did it, okay? Follow me. That's what we did in Exodus. But later on in Deuteronomy, we're about to enter the land of Israel, and we're about to start a society and get a job. God knows that we may struggle with keeping Shabbos. So God says, keep Shabbat there, because remember, I freed you out of Egypt because you were slaves to something. Don't become slaves to your job again. Keep Shabbat for a different reason. Does that mean the first one was a lie? No. They're both true. Shabbat for creation, God did it. Shabbat because we're free from Egypt, God says do it. But which one are we going to hold on to? Which one's going to affect our lives? That's memory. So let's come back to the hesped. A hesped, a eulogy. I don't know if everyone here fully recognizes it, but when that person gets up to give a eulogy, they are making the decision of what is going to be remembered and what is going to be forgotten. What is this person's legacy of memory? And what is the history that's going to be buried in the ground? This famous Confucius saying, man lives, this is how he says it, it's not very gender sensitive, that's old school. Man lives 2 lives. The second one begins when he realizes he has only one. Here's my Jewish take. People have 2 lives. The second one begins when you realize someone else is going to give a eulogy over you. That doesn't apply only to someone who's difficult. That applies to everybody. I knew one person, she wrote out the eulogy she wanted her kids to give. Rabbi, Sheila, do I have to give this? The eulogy, she can't determine from 6 feet under. It's the living person's eulogy. You decide what will be the memory. That doesn't mean that this person, coming back to our situation, did not do things that were frankly horrible, mean, and cruel. But this is the moment where you get to decide what you're gonna say about it. And I have seen people come up here on this bima at Brown Wynn, at Raleigh Hebrew Cemetery, and they have found a way to say. And this is, I want to give a little, what I've seen is, if I have to give I'll give 2 examples of what I think are ways to get there. Is that for most people, not all, but for most people, even when the person was difficult, most people do not know, have no recollection or memory of what their parents were like when they were babies and when they were toddlers. And if you could imagine, at the very least, given all the difficult things they did, painful things they did, they probably changed my diaper in the middle of the night when they had to get up the next morning. They probably fed me the food I asked for when I was hungry. They probably gave me a hug and touched my boo-boo when I was crying. If you can get to that place of trying to see, amidst the challenge, that there was something, and maybe that's the story. Because guys, when the person gives the eulogy and they're speaking out to the crew, the congregation, this is their legacy. You get to decide. You have the power to decide. What's their impact? What will we tell about them? I had people come to me and say, Rabbi, I want to get up there and scream the whole time. I want to get up there and curse them publicly the whole time. By the way, that's a legitimate feeling. It's a legitimate feeling. It's not out of thin air that comes from. But the real power is not in cursing them. The real power is turning whatever they had into something for the future. Maybe even if they didn't intend it. And I've seen and witnessed people do it here. And on this, I'll close. There was a woman, Beth Meyer, a number of years ago, who was dying. She was aging. She was at the if you haven't been, it's not that you should go, but our hospice, the Wake County Hospice, is a place of such unbelievable holiness. It's, of course, a sad and somber place to be, but it's so beautiful and precious. It's in terms of its care and sacred. It's a holy place. And I went there and met numerous times with the daughter. She was probably in her 60s, and she and her mother had a very contentious relationship. Very difficult. But the daughter, to her total credit, honored her by taking care of her to the end. And we went and met numerous times, me and the daughter, discussing the complexities of her relationship, what she's going to say. And at the very end, as many of you know, we have the final Shema. It's a tradition, if we have that opportunity, to go and gather around the person and to say, even if they're not conscious, the final Shema. And there's a place of actually forgiveness where you actually try to forgive each other. And I play a role in that. Well, in this time, I went, and I didn't know what she was going to say because she was so angry at her mom. It was legitimate. It was upsetting. I felt for her. I didn't know what was going to be. And at that last moment, she went onto the bed and climbed up. I can remember it's like yesterday. She climbed to like the edge of it, and she goes right to her ear, and she says, "Mom, and her mom, she's not in this world. She's like 1 foot out of this world, right? Mom, we didn't always have it easy together, and we didn't always get along. But I want you to know that I know that your intention, most of the time, your intention was for good. It didn't always land that way, but you tried the best you could. And for that, I thank you." When we go into a eulogy, a hesped for someone, it's been difficult. Ultimately, I would encourage us to try, it is difficult, to try to find a place of even small where we can say, with compassion, "You weren't perfect, but I know your intention was good, and I'm going to hold on to that intention. And the story I'm going to say at your eulogy is that your intention was to raise me with love and honor and respect and kindness." So come back. Why is this relevant to all? Because the truth of the matter is, Yom Kippur, a day where we rehearse, in a sense, our own death, is we not only think about dying, which for many people is completely legitimately scary and unpleasant, but I want to push you to go one step further. The eulogy. What are people going to say about you? And if you think about that long and hard on this Yom Kippur, who is going to speak? What will they say? What will be the memories they want to pass on about me? And if the answer comes back to you long and hard, that you're not so sure that it's going to be so easy for someone to give a eulogy about you, then this is the day to start making that your life mission. Let me tell you one thing I know for sure. Don't make your eulogy someone's worst nightmare. Let your eulogy speak to the fact that you tried everything you could. And let people remember who you are. Not because they have to go like this around the history, because the history sits right there. But the memory is what remains. May we all live up to the highest level of the eulogy we imagine for ourselves in the year to come. For all of those who have struggled to give those eulogies, I admire you. I dare say our tradition admires you. You have done the highest level of the mitzvah of hesped. What we should learn from that please, all of us, what will they say about us? What will they remember about us? It's actually still in our hands right now in Yom Kippur. So let's get to work. And let's make it easier. And let's make our eulogy shining like the firmament. Gamar Chatima Tova, a Ketiva Tova, a good, sweet new year for all.